and a little bit later on YouTube when you see the video. I am Doug Shane at Bankster17, joined as always by Michael Gudadero at The Big Gouda on Twitter. You can find us on YouTube. If you're watching us on Twitter now, you can find us on YouTube. Just put in my name, Doug Shane. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. Click the notification icon so that you know when we are posting our videos and when we go live, which is every Friday afternoon at 7 p.m. and every Sunday morning at 11:30 during the NFL season to get you ready for your games. And this week, week 13, we've got a lot of interesting stuff coming up. You know what? I should probably mention who we are. We are Bankster DFS. BanksterDFS.com, $3.99 a week gets you all of our content for everything we do. We cover all the sports, pro sports, college sports, niche sports, daily articles, player pools, and the best Slack chat in the business. And, dude, NBA is coming back in a couple weeks. We've got soccer
right around the corner.
I know, right? We still got PGA happening, and we've got this thing called NFL, which and of course the college sports, but this NFL thing too as well. And let's go into week 13. Gouda, how's it going?
Yeah,
and, where's your head at this week?
I'm good. I'm doing well. You know, holding strong these days, and we've got another one of those interesting slates, right? I mean, second straight week that it feels like there's a lot going on, but not a lot of choices almost, and another main slate with no Chiefs on it. You know, no real. We got some good offenses, but no smash spots, as we like to say in the industry this week. So that's going to make it interesting.
I kind of like it. You got to think this week. You really got to think this week.
Yeah, you do. It's not just like, this stack's going to be 30% owned, so we'll just go with them, and then we'll figure out the other pieces. You know, there's a lot of thinking this week, and one of the big things, which, you know, I know we always start with our cash pool and build, so we'll jump right in on quarterback. I mean, I've been pretty locked in on Aaron Rodgers, but now I think there's a big, there's a potential big pivot point, or even a big, I think, conversation brewing now with Ryan Fitzpatrick and a lot of the news that has come out today. It looked like Tua had a setback in practice this week with his thumb, and he's looking on the bad side of questionable. I mean, it's not announced yet, but it seems like Fitzpatrick is going to start. But the head coach Flores may take it up to a game time decision like he teased today. I don't know if that will actually happen. I mean, most things leak out anyway. But with that, there's also two with the Dolphins. We already know Jordan Howard had gotten released a couple weeks ago. Matt Breida got put on the COVID reserve list today, so he's out. DeAndre Washington and Salvin Ahmed are both going to be out as well this week. So the Dolphins right now, as far as healthy active backs, are down to Malcolm Perry and down to Patrick Laird. Now, Myles Gaskin is trending towards playing. He was marked as eligible to return last week. Didn't come back last week. He's trending towards coming back, but if for some reason he doesn't, if he's just not ready, the Dolphins, they're only going to have Malcolm Perry and Patrick Laird in their backfield. I don't know what type of rushing attempts these guys may get. It could be a game that Fitzpatrick maybe just throws 40 times because they have no other option. There's nothing else to do. And against a putrid Bengals defense, let's call it what it is. Fitzpatrick could have quite a time if this plays out. Now, obviously, the injury news is going to play a big factor. If Gaskin is active, a lot of this point goes away. But it's something to monitor and to think about. And for last week, the Saturday news was insane, and today we get some on Friday. So, with that, I mean, where's your head on that, Doug? Would you be switching from Rodgers over to Fitzpatrick because of that, or do you have somebody else in mind that you're eyeing on cash? Where are you kind of falling with these quarterbacks?
Well, pulling up the cash pool, hopefully it's displaying. Hopefully on your end, yes, maybe it's displaying properly. Yes, can you see?
Not yet.
You can't see the cash pool. Oh, good Lord! Let's try this again.
Not yet.
How about now?
No.
Son of a goat. Okay, well, I don't know what's been going on with our cash pool lately. So I'm going to talk about my cash pool as I try to pull it up. That's ridiculous, by the way, that this won't show. But so let's talk anyway about this. My cash pool's got 4 players in it right now, and it had these 4 players prior to the news with the running back situation in Miami. has the same 4 players in it right now, and those 4 players are Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins, Ryan Fitzpatrick, and Mitch Trubisky. You referenced the fact that I'm in on Aaron Rodgers as my quarterback, and I think that's where I'm going to probably stay. I think there's enough value on this slate without having to punt too crazily that Aaron Rodgers, to me, is just a lockdown guy for me at quarterback. Rodgers has not scored. He scored under 23 points only twice this entire year. That's 9 of 11 games. He's been at 23 points or more, and he's really underpriced at $6,800. I know Philadelphia is not as much of a cakewalk as you would think that they might be. Given their record, they actually have a fairly decent defense, but Rodgers has taken out a lot of good defenses this year. The only defense that's really stymied him was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they've been rough on a lot of teams, not so much last week to Patrick Mahomes, but in general, especially earlier in the year, Tampa was a really strong defense. But other than that, Rodgers just tore up everyone. And one of the things about the Packers is it doesn't matter if they're up or down, or where they're at, or if they've got a big lead or they're salting away lead. They just throw. And I know last week Rodgers didn't have a ton of volume, but he didn't need it. He threw all those touchdown passes. They didn't need to do much volume. They just kept getting in the end zone against the Bears. To me, he's just too cheap at $6,800 for only $800 more than Fitzpatrick. I could still use a couple of high-end running backs and Derrick Henry and Austin Eckler and cash with Rodgers. To me, that just feels like a really strong core. I actually would, of the 4 quarterbacks I have in my cash pool, I would actually venture to say that my top Ryan Fitzpatrick to me probably ranks as the fourth quarterback in that pool, with Trubisky being second for me and Cousins being third for me. I really like the Vikings pass game. How about now? Is the cash pool showing now? Mm-hmm. Fantastic. So Aaron Rodgers is the top for me, and I don't have these in order. I have them in price order based on DraftKings, not my preference. But you can see in bold, I've got the players that I prefer in bold. And for me, it's Rodgers or Trubisky. The Lions are terrible against the pass. Trubisky had his best game of the year against the Lions in week 1. I do have, obviously I'm going with Rodgers over Trubisky because Rodgers is, as I wrote in my article today, Rodgers has had 23, as we said, 23 or more 9 of 11 games. Mitch Trubisky got benched for Nick Foles. So that we want consistency. We want safety, and Aaron Rodgers screams safety. Now, $5,400, Mitch Trubisky is probably going to get his points. He's this era's version of Blake Bortles, the king of garbage time. He can run a little bit, and his touchdown prop is 1.5 with the juice to the over, which means that it's the casinos feel like it is likely he will throw for 2 touchdowns at least this week. If you look at 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, that's going to be 16 points, which gets you right about where Trubisky needs to hit value. If he rushes a little bit, throws for more yards, gets an extra touchdown, he's going to smash value in that respect. But I don't know if he's going to need to put up that kinds of numbers. I do want Bears exposure. Allen Robinson's a little banged up, though. Darnell Mooney's a little banged up. Detroit is the worst team in the NFL. From a fantasy perspective, the Houston Texans give up more rush yards per game, but in total fantasy points per game to the running back position, no one is worse than the Detroit Lions. David Montgomery is going to get you targets. He's gotten 3 or more in every game. Sari Cohen's been out 5 or more in all but 1. He's going to get you 12 to 14 carries. So you're looking, if he can get you 60 yards, 3 catches for 30 yards and a touchdown, that's also 18 points. If my math is correct, 6, 3, 3, and 6, that's 18 points. He's got a much easier path, I think, to 18 points than Trubisky, especially because Bears defense is strong. The Lions are all banged up. I'm not sure, and the Bears are not going to want it times. They're going to want to control the clock. That's how the Bears play. I'd rather get my Chicago exposure with David Montgomery. There's another reason to go to Rodgers. My concern with Fitzpatrick is I think Miami controls the game. I think they're going to run the ball even with Laird or Curry, and I do think Gaskin ends up playing, so which will make that moot. Like he'll get his 5 or 6 receptions or targets, but he's also going to get 12 to 15 rushes. Gaskin, Fitzpatrick's not going to need to put up 40 fantasy points. He's not going to need to throw for 3 yards and 4 touchdowns. And the Dolphins don't play that way. They're not just going to lay the wood to a team the way that Kansas City might. For the 400 more, I'd rather go Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins. Really awesome stat about Kirk Cousins, which is why Minnesota's my favorite GPP team. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Kirk Cousins has the second highest percentage of deep throws in the NFL this year. Deep throws meaning 20 more yards down the field. Only Aaron Rodgers has taken more deep shots than Kirk Cousins. And they're within like a quarter of a point of each other. Both of them are over 14% of their passes are more than 20 yards down the field. And it just so happens that the Jacksonville Jaguars are the 6th most generous team on deep passes in the NFL this year, and they're just getting torched in all sorts of games. And Kirk Cousins has put up 3 or more touchdowns, I believe, in 3 of the last 4 weeks. He's putting up a ton of points. He's averaging about 24 fantasy points over the last month. He's been real consistent. I love the Minnesota passing game. You'll notice Dalvin Cook isn't on the running back player pool because I think Minnesota's going to throw. I think this is kind of a rest game for Cook. And I think with Thielen coming back, I like Cousins. So, again, really summarizing here. And, I'm a little wordy. Summarizing, I got Rodgers at the top, Trubisky second, Cousins third, Fitzpatrick fourth. I think when all said and done, Miami's just not going to need to rely terribly heavily on Fitzpatrick. As much as I love him, 5,300, 5,400, he's way in consideration for me. $6,000, I got to spend $800 more to get to Rodgers, and I'm going to get that. I can get that $800 with the news about Anthony Firkser starting for Tennessee. Now that Jonnu Smith is out, I can now go Trey Burton at 3,500 to Firkser at 2,500. Similar type of production. That's an easy move from Fitzpatrick to Rodgers for me. I'm going Rodgers $6,800. What else do you think about the quarterback pool? Obviously, you have an interest in Fitzpatrick. What else do you think about the pool that we have in front of us? Am I missing anyone? Do I need to add anyone to the pool? Take anyone out? What are your thoughts? What's your thoughts on the quarterback pool for this week?
No, I mean to be fair, the entire week. I mean since the prices were released and just my research and my process throughout the week, the only guy that I've had in there is Rodgers. I haven't put anybody in there. I haven't considered anybody after going through stuff and all that. So I've pretty much had Rodgers in there as a lock. I mean, the news today piqued my interest a little bit on Fitzpatrick. I'm kind of on the same boat as you are, that he's just probably not going to need to throw that much because they do have a good defense. They should be able to shut down Brandon Allen or Ryan Finley or their 8th string quarterback, whoever happens to be back there for them this week. But I don't think Miami's going to have much of a problem controlling and winning that game, which lessens the likelihood of Fitzpatrick finding enough value for cash purposes. So I just think Rodgers is in the best spot to throw, to keep throwing, and to just run his game the way that we need in a cash build.
Again, you see, I mean, if I just pulled up the stats, Rodgers has thrown 3 or more touchdowns in 8 of 11 games this year. That's ridiculous. Yeah. He's having maybe the best season of his career, if not one of the top 3 best seasons of his career, and I don't see it slowing down. This is a team on a mission. They're not a high volume run team. It's $6,800 is a stupid price for Rodgers. He should be 75, 78. I mean, it's every week we find the dumb priced quarterback and just play them in cash.
I know it's great. I mean, looking at it, it's crazy that he's the number 5 priced QB this week, and he's probably out of those 5 guys got the best matchup.
I would play him above, even at the same price, play him above Wilson, above Murray, and probably above Herbert. It'd be iffy with Watson because of the rushing floor, but I mean, with the $700 price difference, that's an easy call for me. It's an easy call for me. And even with my love for Cousins this week, it's only a $400 difference. To me, that's a no-brainer. You go with Rodgers because Minnesota does have it in them to just pound the ball with Dalvin Cook 28 to 30 times and just give Cousins 15 attempts, and that would suck. Speaking of Dalvin Cook. Let's move on to that running back pool. You're seeing the pool in front of you. Again, I don't know if you're able to look. I know I posted it earlier this morning. Look, so this might be your first look at that. And you're seeing there's no Dalvin Cook. I actually wrote Dalvin Cook up as a trap play this week. I just think Minnesota's going to throw. Cook's a little banged up. They should handle Jacksonville pretty easily. They're 10-point favorites, Minnesota. And Cook had that injury. We thought he was done. We were texting about it. Yeah. All right, well, Cook's done for the year there. And he came back and played okay, but $9,500, the most expensive player on the slate. If he doesn't get you 2 touchdowns, if he doesn't get you 120 yards, if he doesn't get you 5 catches, he's not hitting value. And I do want to spend up at running back. I just think Derrick Henry's a lot safer. What are your thoughts on not just Dalvin Cook, but kind of looking at the rest of the pool in front of you? Henry, Robinson, Eckler, Sanders, Drake, Montgomery, and Booker. What are your thoughts on the pool? Again, Cook, the pool, and who am I missing? Where's any misconceptions? What do you feel about Buddha?
So with the pool and starting with Dalvin Cook, and I'll even lump Derrick Henry into this because it kind of works the same. Like you mentioned, at that price point, these guys need to put up big games to hit value, let alone to give us something extra to maybe make up for what another guy lacks in doing. Cook is averaging 3x this year on this price. If you mold all his games together. And early in the week, again with the matchup, I was like, "Oh man, how are we passing on Dalvin Cook this week?" But as the week has gone on, and just the overall pricing and everything that there is, I found it very hard all week to build a lineup that I was confident in with Cook or with Henry in there. They're both at good matchups, and I mean, to me, there's even a little more concern with Henry because he doesn't catch the ball. I mean, I know there's been some talk out of Mike Vrabel that they want to try to get him more in the passing game, and
it's like Christmas morning. I read that quote today.
Yeah,
but Christmas morning, they're like, we're gonna get him the ball. Okay.
So I mean, it remains to be seen if they're actually going to do it or not. He had 4 targets last week. He caught 2 of them for only 7 yards, but that extra 2.7 points, is a nice addition on top. But again, just that price point it was very hard for me to build something I was comfortable in this week. And I think, last week we were able to get a stars and scrubs kind of approach because of the pricing and some of those punt plays. There's not really as much this week in there to consider. So I think as of now, I'm going to say I'm going a more balanced approach. With some of the high price running backs, but the guys that are in the $7,000 range, not going with the guys over 9,000. It's a lot, and just with what you need in there. And with your pool also, I'm in agreement on all the guys in there. The only one that I'm very hesitant on from a cash standpoint is a guy that I absolutely loved in the offseason, and I'm actually
Miles Sanders.
Yep, I'm very disappointed with how he's being used this year. It's just dumbfounding. I mean, everything with this Eagles offense is dumbfounding this year. But Miles Sanders has to be the biggest head scratcher. I mean, last week against Seattle, the guy got friggin' 8 touches. He only had 3 targets. He's far and away the best offensive player on the team. Why they're not getting the ball in his hands more or finding creative ways to get it in his hands, it boggles my mind. It really does.
Because Peterson's a terrible coach.
Yeah.
He's an awful head coach. I don't care about the Super Bowl. He's a terrible head coach.
Oh yeah, I mean, forget it. He's long past that grace period. Although it still seems he's getting it. But on the salary that he's at, he's only reached 3x off of this price twice this year. So he's definitely priced up at the top of his range of where he should be. Green Bay can definitely be run on and can be had by the running backs. But to the same token too, I mean, the best part about Sanders is that he's a 3-down back, but if you look in the past 3 weeks, he's got 3 targets, 5 targets, 5 targets. It's not bad, but he's not getting the catches. And even the catches, he's barely averaging 5 yards a catch the past 3 weeks. It's nothing. And even before that, this year he's only had 2 games where he's averaged double-digit yards per reception. That's a little concerning there. And I just don't know if there's going to be enough volume there for him to even end up being, cash viable that we could say, all right, if he doesn't get in the end zone, maybe he can at least get there on volume. If he's getting, if he was consistently getting 18 to 24 touches every week, I'd have no problem with him, even if he wasn't scoring touchdowns. But he just doesn't have the ball enough in his hands, and I don't know why. But until we see something change, I don't know if we can go that route in cash, especially too. Just in that price area, I mean, at 6,700, I'd rather pay the extra 400 to go to Austin Eckler. I'd rather pay down to go to Drake or even Montgomery or Booker, or even in that $6,700 range where he is. You can maybe even consider Chris Carson in there if he's going to get. But I think he has the same type of issue.
That workload on Monday was it Monday night? Yeah, it was awful. Like it made me sick watching that game. That game made me sick.
Yeah, they limited his touches coming back, and he even said that he came out of the game a little sore. So they have a clear path to the playoffs, whether it's division or a wild card. So why risk one of your more important guys? Where all right, let's keep him active. Let's make sure he doesn't get rusty, but let's not push him too much and just in case. So even there, so I just, I just think Sanders, there's too many question marks to be confident in cash this week.
And when I started the week, Sanders, Carson, they were both in my pool. And I'll be honest, Sanders is least preferred for me out of that. The only thing that has him in the pool currently right now is the team realizes that, what they're missing out on by not using him. And the fact that the Green Bay Packers are just awful against the run. And they're I think the fourth most generous team to opposing running backs in football. That matters to me. Probably I should most likely, and I update this throughout the week and listening to our conversation here and realizing Sanders probably needs to move into the GPP one-off pool as a run back from a Packer stack. He's probably, one of the things that we preach about with cash games is take some of the risk out. And Sanders, if I have an issue with Carson, I should have the same issue with Sanders because it's just the matchup is great, but the volume's not there. So listen, this is why we do the game. It's one of the reasons that we share opinions. It's one of the things that makes our Slack chat so good is that we, it's that shared knowledge, and we use that shared knowledge to improve our game. I knew, listen, I wasn't comfortable with Sanders that much either. I was talking to my buddy Steve, who I reference on the show occasionally. We talk all the time about fantasy. He says, if you put Miles Sanders in your lineup, I'm not sure I'll talk to you this week. And I was like, all right. But I did. He's not in my lineup. But, I couldn't get away from the matchup. But really, when you think about it, you think about the way we've been building our pools for the last, month and a half or so. That's, to me, it screams GPP play. It's the right matchup. It's a guy who's been trending down, who could pop, but that doesn't say cash play. And you're right. So I'm glad that we are able to have this conversation because it now helps our membership. It helps the people who are watching us, the people who come into our Slack chat and read the articles. We now see that, hey, good. We've now moved him out of the cash pool. It's a more condensed cash pool, but I don't think we need a larger cash pool. I do want to talk to Derrick Henry point and the Dalvin Cook point a little bit. Prior to the week, I always take a look at, I always look before pricing comes out, where's my head at? And I was like, ooh, Dalvin Cook has this great matchup against Jacksonville, and he had a terrible week, and he's a little banged up. I bet you DraftKings knocks him down to about 85, 8,600. Dalvin Cook had a rough week. He went from 92 to 82 in 1 week, and I was like, ooh, we might be able to get Dalvin Cook at $8,500. $8,500. I still probably would fade him this week, but it would have been a lot harder for me to fade him. 7,900, 8,000. I'm probably really considering Dalvin Cook in cash.
Oh yeah,
9,500. It just became an easy fade for me. The reason I'm not willing to fade Derrick Henry at this point is I do feel like we have the money and we have the opportunity to attack a high volume running back in this, and I don't want it to be Dalvin Cook. And I think Nick Chubb has similar issues that Derrick Henry has in that he doesn't catch a lot of passes. Great matchup, but he doesn't catch a ton of passes. And that's going to make it where I don't want to use him. So I went right back up to King Henry here. And I'm like, listen, Henry's got 3 straight games of 100 yards or more. He's got as much touchdown equity as anyone in the league. There's no one in the NFL who's more likely to get you 150 rush yards and 2 touchdowns. And then when Vrabel came out and says, we have got to be able to throw the ball to Henry, I was like, ding, ding. If he has increased his target share, listen, it's not a lot. You're right. But he went a couple weeks where he had almost none. Those 2 targets matter. That 4 targets, those really matter. And then you go back and look and you're like, you know what? He's had 2 and 2 and 3 and 2 and 3. And he should have had a 5th target. That touchdown he had was a pass. That ball, I'm very confident went forward. And they're not counting it. So really he had 3 receptions on 5 targets. And that does, again, make a little bit of a difference. But if I can get 3 catches for 20 yards, that's all I'm asking for Henry. And if the team is making a conscious effort to get him the ball, and Vrabel's not a coach that goes out there and just lies about what he's going to do. There are coaches that'll say they're going to do something, Bruce Arians, and then does the complete freaking opposite, right? That's not Vrabel. Vrabel says we're going to pound the ball. They pound the ball. We're going to get the ball to A.J. Brown. They get the ball. Like, he doesn't say a lot of stuff, but when he does, they said, listen, we're going to pound the ball of Henry. They pounded the ball of Henry. If he says they're going to try to get him the ball, I'm going to trust it. And if I can just get a couple of extra targets, if Henry can get me 20 to 25 carries with 3 receptions, with the touchdown equity he has against the Browns team that struggles against the run. I know Myles Garrett is most likely going to be back in this game, and the Browns play better against the run with Garrett in the game. But Derrick Henry in December is about as sure of a thing as you have at running back. And I do think locking in that volume at this point and that touchdown equity at this point works because now kind of removed Sanders, Carson, Josh Jacobs doesn't play. As much as I do like James Robinson and really want to talk myself into him this week, I think he's more of a run back on a stack than he is a standalone play because the volume's there. But, 11, 16, 16, 15, 11. Like, he's getting value enough to hit 21 points, even though the volume is there. So really, where am I going to get those touches? And where are we going to, there's I don't like spending up at receiver this week. I just don't see a spot to do that where I really want to spend up to a Devontae Adams or anyone in that range. So it's like, so it's like, all right, let's just lock it in with Henry. We're going to get the touches, and when he's been in good matchups, he's generally produced. Even if he gets 100 yards and a touchdown, that's 19 points. That's not enough, but if you can add 2 or 3 catches, 21, 22 points. All right, well, then we're just a touchdown away from hitting value. I don't know, and he just breaks those runs. I just think he's just so Derrick Henry, and he just feels. And if I could put it a lot together with Aaron Rodgers, with Derrick Henry, and with Austin Eckler, and still not feel like I'm punting a position other than one wide receiver and a tight end and defense, because defense we always punt. I feel like that's a real good place to be. If I had to go down at quarterback to get up to Derrick Henry, I might not do that, but I'm getting the quarterback I want. I think Steve says it best. Derrick Henry's a beast until he's not. I think that probably sums up your thoughts on that there, Gouda, and it's true.
Yeah, no, it's close, and I mean,
he's a beast this week.
Yeah, and I mean also too something at least to be aware of, whether I don't know if it matters all that much, but since his name's escaping me, but since their offensive tackle went down, Jonnu Smith has been blocking more, which has coincided with less production in the passing game. So I wonder, he's been blocking more with pass protection, but also too, he's an excellent run blocker. So I wonder if Jonnu being out has any effect on Henry's game potentially, because when sometimes when you're down blockers, that is potentially an issue. I'm looking on Pro Football Focus and comparing Ferkser and Jonnu Smith, and it looks like they grade out relatively similar from the blocking standpoint, so it may not be as big of a deal. But sometimes when you go from a starter to a backup, sometimes the backups get exposed a little bit. Does that affect Henry? It could. I don't think beforehand there's any real way for us to know. Just something potentially to keep in mind, or to note that if it does go awry this week, that all right, maybe that was one of the reasons for a next week type of thing. But a good positive thing for Derrick Henry, because I'm fair and objective here. The Titans are 5.5-point home favorites this week. That bodes very, very well for Henry. And bodes not as well for Chubb potentially because of that. If it is one of those games that Tennessee controls and has no issue, Derrick Henry is going to be the guy leading the way. We know that already.
Hook wants to know if we're worried about Cleveland being able to control the clock. Not really. I mean, they're both teams want to run, but we know that coming into this game that yes, there's going to be a lower snap volume, but a lot of times with Tennessee games, they want to run the ball and they're going to run clock. And I get generally the other opponent isn't doing that as much. I don't think I'm terribly concerned about that. I think Henry's going to find his way to 20 to 22 touches. I think that makes the passing game a little more worrisome in a GPP, but I think given their potential, Henry's going to get his. Yeah. Before we move, but I thought that's a great question because it is something to consider because there probably will be a lower total snaps, but I think it'll hurt the passing game more than the running game. Before we move on to wide receivers, because I want to move this along to receivers a little bit. Brandon wants to know how we feel about Gallman. Judge doesn't want to have Colt McCoy throw too much. Listen, Gallman's fine. Gallman's got a touchdown every time he's played, but he's also not been over 20 points in any of those games. He's been between 13 and 18 points. I like the Seattle defense. I actually don't think it's a great matchup for the Giants this week. I'm at $5,600. I'd rather use Montgomery or Booker. I do want to touch on we touched on Montgomery before, but we think the Lions are awful. And Booker, I'm going Montgomery over Booker. I just have a feeling this Jets defense is going to come to play this weekend, as they have the last 2 weeks. And the Raiders are they were off last week, and I just think they're going to be off again this week. But at that price point, I'd still rather use Booker or Montgomery than Gallman. I don't think he's the play. I think GPP, maybe he's fine, but I'm pretty much avoiding all Giants this week. I'm just not feeling the Giants. I want to say one that we move on to wide receiver, but if we don't use Cook, and we don't use Henry, and we're not using Chubb in cash, and we're not going to be in love with Aaron Rodgers or Aaron Jones in cash, and we're not using Miles Sanders in cash, and we might not use Chris Carson in cash, there's nowhere to spend up at that point if you're not spending up a receiver, which I don't want to. Maybe you are. Again, at that point, I have the money to do it. I'm gonna go with Derrick Henry. Like, I don't need to save money in that respect, and that's part of the reason I'm going with Henry as well. Moving on to wide receivers, I did reference that I'm not in love with wide receiver that much this week. I don't think the wide receiver position at the top end is very cash friendly. I think they're great players. I just don't find it very cash friendly, and I'm living in that mid range. I think one of the biggest decisions that we're going to have to make at wide receiver is which Houston receiver we want between Brandon Cooks and Kiki QT, because I do think one should be in a cash game lineup. And I'm choosing QT. I wrote about it in my decision points part of my article this week. Do I think QT is going to outscore Cooks? No. But I do think, considering their price points and what I can do with the rest of my lineup, as in get up to Rodgers, Henry, and Eckler, that using QT opens up a lot more options for my wide receivers this week. One of the things to keep in mind is everyone's like, well, Will Fuller's out. Cooks is going to get all those touches, blah, blah, blah. Cooks already had more targets this year than Will Fuller. Like, Will Fuller is the wide receiver one, or was, don't get me wrong, and he was getting all the high volume or high leverage touchdown type targets. But Brandon Cooks was getting more targets, which means they are kind of getting the ball to their wide receiver too. Do I think Cooks' touchdown expectations go up more? Absolutely. But I don't think we're going to see him getting more than the 5 to 9 targets he's been getting every single week, because Will Fuller wasn't. What I do think it does is it takes a guy like Kiki QT and takes him from a 2 to 3 target kind of a guy to put him up to a 5 to 7 type of target guy. And if you look at Brandon Cooks, since Bill O'Brien's been fired, Cooks has scored under 10 points just once in the 7 weeks, and that was 9.9 points. If you get that kind of production out of QT, who I don't think is as talented of a player as Cooks, but if we can look at 10 as like the floor, well, $3,500, 10 is a fine return. It's not a great return, it's a fine return. But if he gets that on volume, if he goes 5 for 50 and then gets a touchdown, now he's at over 4x, and we're feeling in a really good spot. And I think that can happen. I think this game's going to be a bit of a shootout. I think both offenses are playing really well right now. Neither defense is playing particularly well. And I do think, especially if you're going to get Brandon Cooks getting some of the coverage from Xavier Rhodes, you're going to get the off coverage going to Kiki QT. I think that's going to help a lot too. We've seen the second receivers do pretty well against the Indianapolis Colts this year, whereas the top receivers struggled a little bit. I think that plays well for QT. And if it's saving $2,100, I just think makes a lot of sense. Again, I'm not spending up a ton. I think Robert Woods is underpriced at $5,900. He gets a ton of targets. He's had 41 targets the last 4 weeks. It's a good matchup. The Arizona Cardinals are one of the worst teams in the NFL, or most generous teams in the NFL against passes under 10 yards. Well, that's what Cooks. That's where Cooks accelerates, or not Cooks, is Woods. Sorry, that's where Woods accelerates, is in those short passes. He's got one of the lowest ADOT of the receivers on the Rams. Mm-hmm. So I love Woods. He can get there on volume alone this week, and if he gets in the end zone, and they love to run those gadget plays inside the 5 to Woods, if he gets in the end zone, again, he could smash his price, but I do think he's a very solid floor kind of a guy. I do think Corey Davis is overlooked. He scored 10 points in all but one game this year. Corey Davis has been really good this year, especially when A.J. Brown plays. Corey Davis is again, not getting the strong coverage. He's getting the off coverage. And Cleveland has been weak in the secondary this year. They've been burned by passes, and if AJ Brown's getting covered strongly, then that means more passes are going to go towards Corey Davis. And I think at the top end, like I said, I love the Minnesota pass game, and I love Adam Thielen in this respect. Thielen's coming back off the COVID list. He gets a nice share of targets. If he gets 8 to 10 targets, he's priced up $7,400, I think, on Thielen this week. It's $7,400. He's quite a bit, but if we do go down at tight end, then we do have that money to spend up on Thielen and still get a Robert Woods if we're using Kiki QT as our Houston exposure. If we don't QT as our Houston exposure, we use Brandon Cooks. Well, then we might have to use Corey Davis instead of Adam Thielen, and everything kind of changes when we make those shifts. And I'd rather go Thielen and QT than, like, say, Davis and Cooks. So, and I also like to have Devontae Parker in there, as long as Ryan Fitzpatrick starts and Preston Williams does not play, which would happen at the end of the last year. Devontae Parker is a stud. So he's not terribly expensive, and the matchup great against Cincinnati. So I like that idea. And if none of the running backs do play, I think that helps Parker more than it helps Ryan Fitzpatrick, and I'm more likely to have Parker in my lineup over Fitzpatrick. What say you, Buddha? What do you think about this?
Well, yeah, just Parker. I mean, for Parker, Fitzpatrick being the starter elevates Parker tremendously. As we saw last week and before that when Tua was playing, in the difference that it looked. I love that you have Robert Woods in there, because I've been really interested in him all week. he's priced down. I mean, I think he's way too cheap at that price point. It's almost like DraftKings priced them down with in the back of their minds that he'll probably be shadowed by Patrick Peterson, but Peterson's not the same shutdown corner that it used to be. He just isn't, and I think that's a good spot for Woods, and also too, Woods has about 200 yards rushing this year and 2 rushing touchdowns.
That's what I'm saying.
So they get the ball into Woods' hands, and that's it's something to keep in mind when your team is looking to find ways to get you the ball. that means they want you to make plays for them.
I think it's a safer play than Cup. I mean, look at his targets. He's a safer play than Cup.
And every week, Woods is out snapping Cooper Kupp, and even last week, Josh Reynolds actually played more snaps than Cooper Kupp did. They're going back to a lot more of that 11 personnel with Reynolds. Them being more comfortable with Reynolds replacing Brandon Cooks now, and that's actually been benefiting Robert Woods a bit when they're having the 3 receivers out there instead of the more 2 tight ends that they were doing earlier in the year. I do think on the higher end, I think one guy that we can consider here, I think is Tyler Lockett. Now, Lockett does have that more boomer bust that we don't typically care for in cash games, because he can go out there and give you 2 for 20, or he can go out there and give you that 50-point outburst that he had earlier in the year. So we don't know where to get, but the reason that makes me comfortable with Lockett for cash this week is 2 reasons. One, Lockett gets one of the best matchups on the board with the Giants slot cornerbacks. They are they're bottom in the NFL in coverage and basically all metrics out there. So Lockett does have the better matchup, and not that DK Metcalf can be shadowed per se, but against shadow corners, and especially guys that are similar to James Bradbury and his style in play, Metcalf has somewhat struggled in those games, and I forget. And Metcalf and Bradbury did match up last year, and I think Metcalf, only came away with 30 or 40 yards in that game. So that there's a little bit of a history there, although one game doesn't make the sample. But I just think that Lockett is going to be a better, is a high priced guy to at least consider in there, because there is, there is potential. He's the number 1 guy this week in that Seattle passing game.
I can't do it, Gouda. I've been burned by him so much this year.
I know
every single argument.
It's hard
Every week when I'm like, it's the week that they shut down DK Metcalf. I mean, he goes out there and he just goes insane. I just don't know if DK Metcalf is going to get shut down by Bradbury. I see it. It happened. Look, against Ramsey, he had a really rough game against Ramsey, and Lockett did fine in that game. And Peterson too. He got saved by a touchdown, but he really hasn't. He's faced some tough corners. Peterson a few weeks, in week 7 as well. I mean, it's happened. He had some bad games this year, but. Lockett and Cash. Get it for a tournament, but Cash is going to be. I totally get your argument. If he's 65, I consider that a lot more. 74 is tough. He needs 22.5 points. He's got there twice all year, and that was on his boom games. That's a tough one. I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, are you putting Lockett in your cash lineup? Is he there now?
Not as of now, no. So it's and I mean, I'm probably not gonna go that.
And
way
I'm not here. I'm not trying to be belligerent about it either. I want to know how.
Of course.
It's the same with me with the Miles Sanders thing. I understand why I should play him this week, but I don't know if I can pull the trigger. Is that kind of where you're at with Lockett? Like, you get all the reasons why it should work, but at the end of the day, is he going to? And I know we can't decide until Sunday.
Yeah,
Sunday,
I don't.
Sunday, I ask you, is he going to be in that cash lineup?
Ultimately, I don't think so. But I just think it's something. I think it's something to be considered. Like, if people, if some of you are in that mentality of fading Cook and Henry this week and building more of a balanced lineup, or if you do, if you have extra money, around, and you were on, and you were using Allen Robinson, let's say, but now the news today of this injury, while not that serious, and he still looks like he's going to play, but you're a little concerned about that. Well, if you had the extra money and you could say, all right, if I want to get off of Robinson, where do I want to go? When you have the money to spend up for Lockett, I don't think it's a bad idea, in a
Now, let me
scenario
ask
like
a question, though. In this scenario that you have just shared with us, do I already have Adam Thielen in my lineup?
I'm going to say no.
Then I would go up to Thielen in that respect.
You go up to Thielen instead. Okay.
I think part of the reason is we take a look at those game logs, and I don't want to be a game log watcher guy because I know that can be annoying, but also look at how many times Thielen has hit close to that 20.
Well, that's the thing for
he gets there a lot more often.
Yes, and Thielen is definitely more consistent.
In a tournament as a one-off, I'm totally buying into Lockett. I'll probably even add him into the pool. Into the tournament pool when we get there, but in cash, I mean, I hope you're not offended, Buddha, but I don't think I'm putting him. I don't think I'm adding the line to here. Now, if there's someone that's Lockett that I should be adding, I would love to know who that can be because I want to make sure the pool is tight. But who else you got for me that's not Tyler Lockett for that pool?
So 2 low-end guys that I was looking earlier in the week, and because to be fair, earlier in the week, Kiki Kuti actually. I don't even remember when the Will Fuller news was. It's been a blur since Thanksgiving. But Kiki Kuti actually slipped my mind really until we were talking about it yesterday. So I had so this is the only time you're ever going to hear me say this. So you may want to extra record it. I had either Denzel Mims or Rashad Perryman on my short list this week for a cheap receiver play. And
I talked about Mims in the article. I get it with Mims. The targets have been there.
They are. I mean, it's incredible now that all 3 of the receivers are healthy. Darnold actually is favoring Mims and Perryman over Crowder now a bit. I don't know if it's out of desperation to try to save his job for next year or something, even though we know that ship has already sailed. Or if it's the talent showing through with those 2 receivers. I mean, Perriman was a first round pick, a long time ago. Mims is a very talented kid. A lot of the talk on Mims was that he was a project receiver, but in any other year, he would have been a late 1 or early 2nd round pick. But because of how loaded this wide receiver class was, Mims was an afterthought. So, so there is some talent there. And if you guys are maybe going very strict on only using one player, and you feel, say, we'll get to this, but you say Jordan Akins, maybe you're more comfortable at tight end over Ferkser, and you don't want to use a Houston receiver. I think Mims or Perryman are guys that you can consider, at a cheaper wide receiver price point this week. Because I don't think there's a lot of options down there. The Jaguars receivers are kind of out of the mix because Chark is back. So we don't. I love
Chark, by the way, to GP. We'll get to that in a second, but I love Chark for a GPP. But cash, you can't do it.
Yeah, and also too with how the Raiders played last week and that back and forth travel, and now another 1:00 game on the East Coast later in the season. Potentially, who knows what the weather may be like. But if you get one of those cold, brisk days in the 30s, maybe the Jets got a fighting chance here. Maybe this is the one game that they win. And if that's happening,
there's our Jets fan talking. Maybe
if that happens,
would it be just the most Jets thing ever to win their way out of Trevor Lawrence? Wouldn't that be the most Jets thing? That would be the Adam Gase's chef's kiss parting gift to the Jets and a little on the way out. That would be the most Adam Gase thing ever with the Jets. Holy shit! I hope it happens.
Yep. Oh yeah. Oh, it will.
I should probably get rid of my order on my Trevor Lawrence jersey. No, I get where you're going. And honestly, I was debating on Mims. Him, I will add to the pool because I really just needed someone else to say the name before I put him in the pool because I know it's the right thing to do. He's had 7 or more targets in 4 of the 5 games he's played. Like, he's not connecting on a lot of them because he's a downfield kind of a guy, but he's had 10 points in each of the last 3 weeks. If any of those games he had a touchdown, he smashes value. He's 4x. So I do think, and the Jets may throw. I mean, it's one thing to do. Give more carries to I almost said Al Gore. But give more carries to Frank Gore. They're about the same age. So what I mean? The inconvenient truth is that Frank Gore is old. And so the Jets need to at some point start seeing what they've got at that receiver position with their younger guys, and Perryman's still a fairly younger guy. He's not like 38 or anything, and they want to see what they can do. And I do think they're going to need to let Darnold throw to see if he's got anything that's going to convince them to go in a different direction than Lawrence in the draft. Though I also think that ship, unfortunately, has very much sailed for Darnold, who I think will pick up somewhere else. I would love to see him in maybe Washington. I think Darnold does have a future, but in the NFL, I just don't think it's with the Jets. As soon as he gets rid of Gase, I think he'll be much better. It just won't be with the Jets.
Yeah, I mean, and also too, there's two key injuries also for the Raiders. They're going to be out without one of their starting D tackles, and also too their starting safety Jonathan Abram, and those types of things. Even though defensive players don't mean much in the fantasy world, it has a very big impact on these offensive players, of course, and sometimes some of that stuff gets overlooked. And, we brought it up last week with Indianapolis missing two of their key defenders in Buckner and Autry. And look what Derrick Henry did last week.
Sure.
So now with the Raiders, losing their starting safety this week, that opens up the deep part in the middle of the field a bit, for Mims as well. So, and the Raiders secondary is bad, without him being out. So that just, potentially opens things up a little more. And, these are the types of things to look for. And again, Mims, all you need is 6 for 60, or 5 for 70. You're not
catch a long one and he's good.
Yeah. I mean, you're not looking for a lot. I mean, you're looking for a similar output like Kiki Kuti is, so you're kind of in that same boat.
And I will say, as a proud Las Vegan, I live here. I will say, my dad watches a lot of the Raiders game, and we talk about Abram quite a bit. It might actually be better for the Raiders that he doesn't play. That guy injures more of his own teammates with his reckless play than he does the other team. And honestly, he's so aggressive that I think it's less likely that whoever replaces him, it's less likely that they will overrun a pass than Abram would. I think I'm half joking. I'm not 100% sure how serious I am about that, but Abram he's a reckless player. He's a good one, but he's kind of a reckless player, and that might actually help the Raiders. But I understand the point with him out. Whoever's in there is not as talented as Abram at all, and that does open the game up for Mims and Perriman. I do think down the field, less so for Crowder. I think they know what they have in Crowder. I think it's time to see what they have in the other guys. Moving on to the other positions. We'll touch briefly. We were talking about the Jets, so I just will throw it in there for defense. Don't pay up for defense. We say it every week. We're going to say it again. I do have the Seahawks in there because Colt McCoy going to Seattle. The Seahawks, since Carlos Dunlap has signed with the team, they've put up 19 sacks over the last 4 weeks, and their pass defense has been significantly better. I think they are an amazing play this week. I just don't want to spend $3,300 on a defense. The money's there to do it. I just don't want to. But I can't not recognize that they're a strong play. But I like the way the Jets have been playing. They're an aggressive defense. They've had 7 sacks over the last 2 weeks. They've had 17 DraftKings points over the last 2 weeks, and they're not the worst matchups in the world. The Raiders aren't a great offense, especially without Josh Jacobs. The team is probably not going to play all that well. I can't see how they would. They've been misusing their receivers all season long. I mean, when Nelson Aguilar is your one, but you've got Edwards, who I know has been injured, Waller and Ruggs, but you've been forcing it to Butterfingers Aguilar. I'm just not 100% sure. And Derek Carr is 2 games from having the old Sam Darnold, I'm seeing ghosts out there kind of a game. He's looking a little skittish lately. I love the Jets at 2,100 to be a decent defense, not just because of their price point. I actually think they're a decent play this week. Is there any and I don't want to spend very long on defense. So, any defense in particular that you think that I'm missing, or are we just all riding the Jets this week?
No, all riding the Jets. Jets or Seahawks. That's about it. I don't think we need to. I don't think we need to go anywhere else. I mean, we've we've talked to death why you don't want to pay over $4,000 for a defense.
Exactly.
We've seen it play out multiple times. And that's about it on the defensive end.
I've seen some love for the Falcon defense because of the Taysom Hill thing and the fact that they had 5 points against, or they had 3 sacks and a turnover against Hill 2 weeks ago. At $2,400, I don't get it. I don't get it at all. The Saints have put up 30 points each of the 2 weeks Taysom Hill has started. The Falcons defense is bad. I'd rather play the Jets for $300 less. So I don't get where people across the industry are using the Falcons. I just don't see the thing with the Jets.
I guess because the Falcons woke up a bit last week. They had that monster performance. And, when they did play the Saints 2 weeks ago, they did have 5 fantasy points. I mean, it's not awful.
They're fine,
but yes, I would rather pay less for the Jets.
I think that the Raiders for the Jets are a better matchup than the Saints for the Falcons, especially the Jets are at home. The Falcons are on the road. I think the Falcons are on the road.
No, it's actually in Atlanta.
No fan. It doesn't matter.
But
it doesn't matter. Taysom Hill has proven that he can get the team down the field. So we'll strike that other comment before. It doesn't matter. I still think that the Raiders coming east is just a way worse matchup for the Raiders. I think it's better for the Jets. Tight end, I'm in the same boat with tight end as I am with defense. I know I've got Hawkinson in there, and it's simply because the Bears have given up the second most fantasy points to tight ends this year, or among the worst for tight ends this year. But I'm spending down. There's way too many good options. At 3,500 or less, the Houston Texans are one of the most generous teams against tight ends. We took advantage of that on Thanksgiving when we used Hawkinson. Burton gets 4 targets every single game. He gets red zone looks. I don't like that Jacoby Brissett has come in to steal those red zone carries that were going to Burton on the Wildcats. But
I know that was
and early in the game last week, they were targeting Burton. Again, four targets against that Houston against that defense could be enough. If he goes up to 5 or 6, even better. Rudolph should be fine with Irv Smith out. They give their targets to a very small group of players. Rudolph is one of them, and Jacksonville's not a great defense. Akins should see an uptick in production with Will Fuller out, and then Ferkser was getting targets when Jonnu Smith does play. I understand he may need to block a little bit more, but at $2,500, even if you're using Henry, he's a free square this week. You put him in there, and then you can play up elsewhere, pay up elsewhere. I don't have a problem with Ferkser. I don't know why we'd spend up a tight end. And I did say Darren Waller in my article is a complete trap play this week. The Jets have been awful against the tight end, but the Raiders are not using the tight end properly. Waller has come within 2 points of value this week, only twice all season long. Every other tight end on my list has gotten there more often, except for Akins. Even Tyler Eifert's been better. Hunter Henry's been better in terms of getting closer to 3x. I don't know why anyone would use Darren Waller at $6,100 this week. He's way overpriced based on his actual production. We want to talk in theory what Darren Waller can do. Actual production says he hasn't done it this year. I'm not interested at all in Waller. I'm spending down at tight end so I can spend up elsewhere. Gouda, give us a quick look at what you think of tight end, then we'll move on to GPPs quickly.
Jordan Akins. I mean, that's where I was all week.
Sean would be proud.
Yeah. Akins is very talented. Watson, when he has those dump offs or the short passes, they're more likely to go to the tight ends than the running backs, as we've seen all year. And Indianapolis is actually one of the better matchups in the league for tight ends. So not only Akins has a very favorable matchup, he's played pretty well this year, and again $2,900, you don't need much from him. Yeah. You can. I think you can even make the argument Akins is the number 2 pass target right now for that team. Let's get some.
I got Kuti in my cash lineup now. Let's stall a roll on that one just a little bit. No, I can see it though. He did have a rough Thanksgiving though, and I do think that's going to scare people off. But I think that was a weird game. They were just going all Fuller and Cooks that game.
Oh yeah, that was.
I think Akins is a big part of this offense, and I think $2,900 is way too cheap.
Yep. And I think too, if for whatever reason in your cash build you need that extra $400 to go down the Ferkser, go for it. It's kind of same premise. Ferkser will get a couple targets. He doesn't need much. And again at 2,500, as we say about defense, at 2,500, if Ferkser only gets you 4 points, it's not killing your lineup.
Yeah, pretty much. I agree completely. All right, cash pool looks pretty solid. I will update throughout the course of next year DFS members. You will get the updated versions as it goes live. It's just you have the link. It'll update as I update it throughout the course of the weekend. If you're interested in becoming a BanksterDFS.com member, head on over there. $3.99 a week gets you this and all of our content for all of our sports. And Brandon, EuroLeague as well. Brandon List wanted to make sure to promote his EuroLeague. He's been killing EuroLeague, honestly. If you just signed up for EuroLeague at $3.99 a week, it'd be worth it. But you get all of our content for the $3.99 a week for every sport, and just for EuroLeague, it's worth it. We're going to go real quick on as in our our far-reaching efforts to shorten up this weekly conversation. We talk mostly GPPs on Sunday, and so we're going to focus then mostly on Sunday. But I do want to hit a little bit on where my pool is at right now for GPPs. See if Gouda has a different. Hold on, sorry, just a question Mark G wanted to ask, and he's been with us forever, so I want to make sure he gets his question answered. 2 tight ends in cash this week. I can't think of a time I've ever used 2 tight ends in cash. I do it in a GPP. I just don't think we need to in cash.
No.
You agree, right? If we're going to do a second tight end, let's say it was Burton and Akins, I'd rather just do Burton and QT or Akins and Mims, or I'd rather take the wide receiver at that low than taking the second tight end.
It's one thing if you're punting tight end in the actual tight end position, because everybody is in the same boat of needing a tight end. But if you're using a second tight end, then you really need the production from that second guy that you're putting in the flex spot. So, really the only time you're probably going to use that. I mean, last year I guess there were some scenarios where you could have Kelsey and Andrews or Kelsey and Waller in the same lineup, and spend down on receivers. But we don't have that kind of situation this week, and I don't think we've had it at all any week this year.
Also, the percentage of routes run compared to dropbacks for tight ends is far lower than it is for wide receivers. So the odds of getting a game where the tight end is asked to stay in and block is a lot more than you think. I mean, Logan Thomas has like the highest percentage of routes run amongst, for dropbacks for tight ends in the league, and Logan Thomas hasn't been this high-end guy. So unless it's a Kelsey Andrews or a Kelsey Ertz from a few years ago type of situation, it's just, or Gronk in his prime, Gronk in his prime and Kelsey in his prime. Those would be 2 tight ends because they're like wide receiver 1s or wide receiver 2s. We just don't have that on the slate. I wouldn't even run like Hawkinson Henry, or Hawkinson Waller or Hawkinson Goddard or something. I wouldn't do it. I just think the wide receivers at that price range, like I could get Michael Pittman for $4,900. I'll take him over any tight end on the slate. So there's a place guy I could put in my flex and run a punt tight end for cash. GPPs, this is kind of where I'm at. I don't tend to get too much into GPPs until later in the weekend when I get a better idea of where those contrarian plays are coming in. The last few weeks, it's been that Kansas City stack because no one wants to spend up. Even though last week they're a little higher owned, getting the whole stack in there, particularly Tyreek Hill, was not where people were going. And we were on Tyreek Hill from day one in both cash and tournaments. This week, I'm not seeing where the contrarian stack is coming in. I do think Green Bay, because of their prices, may go under-owned a little bit. So obviously we'll have some Rodgers stacks and GPPs. I think nobody's talking up the Chargers, but I'm not 100% sure how into the Chargers in a GPP I'm in, simply because the Patriots defense is as not last year Patriots as they are. They're still not a bad defense. And I'm just not sure this is the week. Again, Herbert is $100 more than Aaron Rodgers. He's $500 more than Kirk Cousins. I would much rather go with the Packers or Vikings in a tournament. The team I'm going to lean most heavily on in a tournament this week, and my number one GPP lineup, at least as of now, Friday night, 2 days before, day and a half before kickoff, I'm looking at the Vikings. I do think Dalvin Cook's going to carry some ownership, and I just think there's an opportunity to get some leverage with the Vikings. And I think the run back for me is my favorite run back of the week, which is a $5,400 DJ Chark. He's priced way too low for his upside. We know Glennon's going to throw it. Glennon said he's going to throw it. He did last week. He looked okay throwing it. And the Minnesota pass defense, not as bad as advertised, still not great. And as a 10-point underdog, the Jags will throw it. Chark is their number one receiver. And he's getting the targets when he's in there. He hasn't been successful, but he gets in there, and he's great in the red zone. I just think running Cousins, Thielen, Jefferson, Chark is a real high upside type of way to run it. And you can put other players in to surround it there. Definitely, there's a lot of nice correlated stacks this week between the Houston, Indianapolis game, the Tennessee, Cleveland game. And you can even maybe, if you're willing to use Hawkinson as your tight end, get a really under-owned Bears, Lions run back stack this week. I'll throw one more name out there, and then I'm going to let Gouda talk about his GPPs before we wrap it up. My favorite GPP play this week, I think, the name I continue to come back to every single lineup I want to put together is Jonathan Taylor. The Houston Texans have given up the most rush yards. Gouda loves it, right? The most rush yards per game in the NFL this year. Taylor was COVIDed out last week. He's back at the lineup at $5,700, coming off a 24-touch game. If this is the time of year that you're going to want to grind the ball, Indianapolis, listen, Frank Reich's not a terrible coach. Phillip Rivers as much as I give him a hard time, is a fairly smart quarterback. And if he's got any audible, obviously he's going to have the right to audible and change the play at the line. If he sees the right matchup against a horrible Houston front seven for rushing, they're going to just pound the ball with Taylor. His touchdown equity is going to be higher this week. I just think Taylor at $5,700 has a real shot to, not 100% guaranteed, but he's got a real shot to get 20, 25 points this week and just totally crush his value. And at $5,700, it makes a lot of sense. And you can run him back with Cook, with Akins, with QT. There's so many run back options as a secondary stack. But even as just a one-off player, get me as much Jonathan Taylor as I can get. He will be in tournaments, my most owned player, guaranteed, locked in, 100%. It's going to be Jonathan Taylor this week, unless he gets another bout of COVID, which I don't think is happening. Gouda, what's your take on tournament? Obviously, you agree with the Jonathan Taylor take.
I do. I do.
Where are you going for tournaments this week?
Yeah, I'm on the Taylor train. I was all about him last week until the COVID bug hit. But I think it's an even better matchup this week. And if what we saw 2 weeks ago from Taylor, if that holds true, he's hopefully in for a big workload. As far as the stacks or my tournament leanings or plays right now, I don't have that much conviction on any one team either. It's just gonna be one of those weeks. It's just gonna be spread out. It's gonna it's gonna be one of those weeks that you identify what stacks you want to do, but there's not gonna be anything that I think you're gonna find overly strong conviction in. Like even the Minnesota one. Like I know you're really into the Vikings. For sure. Pass game. I don't think you're stacking the Vikings on 40% of your lineups, or even 30%, even 30% of your lineups.
It's not like Kansas City where I literally had 40%, 20, 23%, maybe, something like that. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think my strongest conviction this week is going to be my fate of Deshaun Watson. I wrote it in my pivot and leverage article that I'm even going as far as to say I'm not going to use Watson in a single lineup this week. I wish I had saved it, but I forget the exact numbers. But over his career, when Will Fuller is out of the lineup, and this takes into account Hopkins being in the lineup, Watson's fantasy points per game dropped from, I think it was like 25 a game to 22 a game, and his ADOT actually drops from about 8.5 to 7.5. Now this could be a different scenario because Hopkins was not necessarily a deep guy. He was more of a, give me double-digit targets a game, where now they do have Brandon Cooks, and Cooks can be a deep threat, so it may not impact it as much. But when you lose a guy like that and you're kind of changing the game plan on a fly, it can affect things. And, on the Indy defense, as much as those two guys, Buckner and Autry being out last week were good things. Well, now they're back this week. They were activated off the COVID list. They're fine. They're ready to go. And that's really going to beef up that front seven. And now with that, we know how bad the Texans' offensive line is. If the Colts are in the backfield all day, maybe Watson doesn't have the time to throw. Maybe he does struggle. It's one of those divisional games. It could be a grind him out, tough kind of game where Watson doesn't maybe hit the value. Watson's priced up. Yeah, I mean, and he's priced up there. Watson's at 7,500. So with that in a tournament, if you're looking to come top 100 in a large field, or if you have top 10 aspirations, Watson's got to give you 30 points at least to get you there. I don't see it. I don't see it in this game. I think Watson is fine. He's probably going to reach his 20 points, but we're not looking for 20 points. We're looking for at least 30 from him. I just don't think he's going to get there.
Yeah, you got to 4x it at least 4x tournament.
So that's I would say out of anything with tournaments this week, that's my strongest conviction is just completely staying away from Watson. And other than that, I mean, as of right now, at least it's going to be kind of a mixed bag for me. I'm just kind of going to be all over the place, mixing and matching, and just kind of seeing what fits and makes sense. I mean, The one thing that worked well for me last week, which I'm probably going to do again, I had the double stack, the Colts, the double stack of Phillip Rivers with Naheem Hines, and it worked out pretty well. It actually that was one of my lineups. I was able to have Tyreek Hill and Derrick Henry in it. So it
Nice.
just happened to work out because of the savings those two guys gave. And same thing, I think Rivers will be a solid enough play, and with the way he spreads the ball around, you can run Phillip Rivers naked because there's may not be one particular guy that goes off where Rivers is throwing it to 12 different guys and they're all getting 10 fantasy points or whatever it amounts to type of thing.
Yeah, I know it's something you guys mentioned. I think it was you in chat that in the Slack that's mentioned that maybe running Rivers naked is the way to go with your Colts GPP stacks, and it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's been, and I mean, listen. Other than that, as far as stacks, I mean, I'm kind of where you are with that list and all.
This feels like more of a cash week, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like last week felt like more of a tournament week because I feel like we had a lot of upside with that Tampa Bay stack. I really do, and I thought Buffalo, Los Angeles, Buffalo and the Chargers would play out a little bit differently than it did. I think that was a lot lower scoring than we anticipated.
Yeah.
But I felt like we had really good spots for tournaments. And outside of, again, I like Minnesota game, but outside of that, I just think and Green Bay should be an interesting spot as well. But I just don't see. I'm not as excited about some of the tournament options that we have this week. And I think that correlates really well with the totals. If I'm not mistaken, there's only one game on the main slate above a 50-point total this week, whereas last week there were 5 or 6 games above a 50-point total.
Yeah.
When the 2-point totals are lower, I think it steers us more towards cash, which we're doing anyway. And now, does that mean on Sunday we won't talk about tournaments? No, by Sunday we'll have an idea of where we want to go with tournaments. My guess is, but I'm still going to be pushing cash a lot harder this week. I feel cash is just a better strategy for this week. The slate sets up better for it. And if you look at these one-offs, I'm throwing up some of the leverage one-off guys who I'm just going to try to get exposure to in tournaments, even if I'm running them without a run back play. We had Tyreek Hill last week. I like Justin Jefferson last week. We had a few other guys every single week that really popped for me. There's not a lot of names that pop for me this week. Jonathan Taylor is one at his price. I think Kenyon Drake is a name that pops for me at that price as well, especially with Kyler Murray having his shoulder issue. They're not trying to run him as much right now. And Drake has had 13 or more fantasy points in all but like one start this year. He's getting a ton of carries. He's now he got 9 targets the last 2 weeks. And the biggest issue we had with Drake this year was him not getting targets. And at his price point, I believe, what's he at 57? At $1,500, if Kenyon Drake can get in the end zone again, and he's got some touchdown equity, I do think that this is a really good spot for Kenyon Drake against the Rams, especially with Kyler Murray a little banged up. He's looked better running the ball than Chase Edmonds. I know everyone wants to say Chase Edmonds has been the better player. I would take Kenyon Drake above Chase Edmonds in this game and the way they're playing right now. 100 times out of 100 right now, especially now that Drake is catching the ball. But even when Edmonds had his chance to be the starting running back, he looked awful. They didn't run the play, but they run the same plays for Drake, and Drake can get through the line and find the hole better than Edmonds. That's why Drake's the starter. Edmonds isn't. Edmonds is a great change of pace back, just like a Tariq Cohen is, and he's useful in that role in the right matchup. But on a week-to-week basis, Kenyon Drake's that guy. Again, looking at the one-offs, I did mention I like DJ Chark. Houston, again, struggles a little bit on the back end, so I think Michael Pittman is a guy that we can target as a one-off kind of a play if we're not stacking him with Rivers. He had 9 targets last week. Everyone's talking about, he only had 2 catches, but he had 9 targets. Rivers has given him 7 or more targets 3 of the last 4 weeks. He's great in the open field. I don't think I have him on the cash pool, but I don't have him in my cash lineup because I just don't think he's as safe as I want him to be. And that 2-catch game threw me for a loop. That's following a 3-catch game where he only had the 3 targets. I do think, though, he's got the upside to break the bank at $4,900. Guy who they've now come out and said Raheem Morris is called him a wide receiver 1. Jenkins is out for New Orleans. I do think that there is an opportunity for Lee to have a big game. And I'll use him in tournaments. I won't touch him in cash. This is the way an offense scares me, but I'll use him in tournaments. And the name that keeps popping up where people are saying is that Houston likes that Walter kid. I know nothing about him other than the fact that Houston likes him and gives him a run out there. If you want to take a shot on the 3rd receiver, who's really the 4th or 5th receiving option for the team, or 6th or 7th, he's going to get snaps. If you absolutely need a stone cold price guy, as Stoneman, and there's not a lot, there's no real 3K options I like this week. He's a guy I might throw out there just because he's getting a lot of talk. But again, that's coming from me not knowing much about the guy, just knowing that all the talk is that he's going to get some run and the team really likes him. So those are some names that are out there, but I'm not as jazzed up about these guys aside from maybe Taylor. I'm not as jazzed up about collection of one-offs as I've been over the last 4 weeks since I've restarted the Hail Mary article. I don't feel that the one-offs are there this week, and I think that's where we're focusing more on cash than GPPs this week.
Yeah, no, I agree. And even there's 3 games that are 50 points or more, and that does not include the Saints and the Falcons. The Saints and the Falcons only have a total of 46 points this week. I'd love to know when a total in their game has been that low, like when the last time was, because this is a game that routinely over the years has easily put up 50 to 60 points every time they play. But one thing though, Julio did practice, and he's ready to go. He says he feels good, and Julio's never 100%, but he's at 80%, which 80% is equivalent of another guy being at 100%. So maybe there's something there with that Atlanta New Orleans game. If Atlanta can put the ball in the end zone, maybe it forces New Orleans to open it up a little bit with Hill. Hill's got a cannon; he can throw it downfield. He just doesn't have much accuracy. But maybe there's something in that Atlanta New Orleans game just because there's the history of the high scoring. But that remains to be seen what Peyton actually is willing to open up with Taysom Hill. And unfortunately, we haven't had a game yet to see that. Obviously, with that Broncos debacle last week and 2 weeks ago, they controlled Atlanta pretty easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm just right now that Taysom Hill's been good for fantasy, but the numbers aren't really there. He needs those rushing touchdowns to get there. Michael Thomas had the one game with all those catches, but he still didn't put up a huge score. And Kamara, it doesn't exist anymore. Kamara he is unplayable in fantasy. I don't even think I was watching a different stream earlier today, and someone has said, "Hey, is Kamara a sharp play this week?" No, Kamara's a sucker player. He could go for 30 points, and I think I just am not willing to invest in him at this point.
No,
I'm staying away from this game for the most point, though I will acknowledge $6,600 if Julio's healthy. That's a pretty low price for a guy. Julio's.
He's really priced down this week.
He might end up on the if I get the real clean bill of health from him, and I'm sure he's going to get his snap share, then he might end up on that one-off list, and he might end up in quite a bit of my lineups because it's $6,600. Julio Jones is a $8,300 wide receiver that we're getting for a huge discount there.
Yeah.
All right, good. I think we've done it, man. I think we got through this thing. We got our cash pool out there. We've got our GPP pool, which will evolve over the weekend. My Hail Mary article comes out tomorrow afternoon. You've got your leverage article for Bankster members already on the site. The cash game article's on the site. We will go live Sunday morning, 11:30 Eastern. And, of course, the Slack chat will always be popping for Bankster members, banksterdfs.com, $3.99 a week. If you have any questions, you make sure you check us out on Twitter. I'm Bankster17. He's at The Big Gouda. You find us on YouTube under the name Doug Shane. Please make sure you like, share, subscribe, and click that notification icon so you know when we have new videos. There most likely will be a cash game strategy video coming out this weekend. Not for this week specific, but just like how to build a cash game lineup. We've got that. We've got how to build a GPP lineup in there, and a whole bunch of other cool stuff on our YouTube page. And again, banksterdfs.com, $3.99 a week gets you everything we do, all the sports, all the articles, the Slack chat, the player pools, pro sports, college sports, niche sports. And again, the very best Slack chat in the business, award-winning writers. You get it all for under $4 a week. You really can't beat that deal. Buy yourself a little Christmas present this year. Come join the Bankster team. Join the Bankster family, Team Bankster. You guys Sunday morning, 11:30 for Michael Gudadero. I am Doug Shane, and we will see you later.